Okay, so we have a new large language model base called Falcon. So this is not just a fine tuning of another model that's already been out there. This is a new model that's trained from scratch with pre-training. There are actually two of the models, the big one being 40 billion parameters, which is a size that we haven't really seen that much before, except for maybe the Llama 65 billion kind of thing. And then there's another one that's a 7 billion parameter model. So this has basically just been released in the last day or so. Unfortunately, there is no paper yet. We know a little bit about it from this tweet here and from some of the things that are on Hugging Face, which I'll go through in a second. So the model looks very interesting in that it basically has a number of things to speed up inference, including flash attention and some other optimizations that are in there as well. They have also released a data set that goes along with this that they used for basically training their model as well. And they've also got a number of interesting things, which I'll talk about in a moment around the license and stuff. So the sort of first key thing, though, is that this has already been benchmarked by the Hugging Face benchmarking system. So this is the Hugging Face Open Large Language Model Leaderboard. And you can see that Falcon now is at the top of this, and it's at the top by a good amount compared to a lot of the other models. So we can see for a whole bunch of the different tasks, including the Arc Reasoning Challenge that we've got here, for the HelloSwag, it's quite a bit above other ones in here. So this is definitely the new leader. Just to give you a sense of this benchmark here of HelloSwag, if we look at the comparisons to the top models out there, we've got GPT-4 at few shot in getting 95 for this. The Palm model's getting 87 with just one shot there. And if we come down to this sort of few shot, which is pretty sure what they're doing here, 10 shot as well, we can see that GPT 3.5 is getting 85.5. And if we come back and compare that to this, it's getting 85.3. So it's very close, just it's being beat just by a smidge by GPT 3.5 here. So the key takeaway is that this is definitely a powerful model. Obviously, there are a lot of challenges with running inference on it and getting those things to work. If we also look, though, there's a 40 billion model. And if we scroll down, there's also a 7 billion model. And the 7 billion model also does, pretty well in its size range. So they make the point that their benchmarks are actually beating models like MPT-7. And sure enough, if we come over and have a look here, we can see HelloSwag, they're getting 76.1 for their base model. And if we go back here for the base model here, they're getting 78 point. So take these benchmarks with a grain of salt. Like I always say, it depends on what your use case is. You should always try models out and see for yourself. But it is pretty clear that this is a powerful model going forward. So one of the interesting things about this model is the whole license about this. So I'll just go back to the tweet. So when we look at the license, they mention it here, is that this is not a free model. It's a model that if you're making more than $1 million a year, then they expect you to pay a royalty for the model. So if we have a look at their license that they've attached to this, they talk about that this concept of a royalty. Now that royalty only kicks in once you're making more than $1 million a year from this. And the royalty turns out to be 10%. So I know on Twitter, a lot of people are up in arms about this. For me, I kind of feel like, okay, if people are going to train these huge models, then they probably want some way of making their money back. What I do wonder, though, reading the license for this, because here we're talking about the license is going to be 10% royalty for this. What I do wonder with this whole sort of licensing scheme is that surely this means people will set up one company that basically just provides this model as an API that only makes always less than $1 million a year, and then licenses that to another company. But anyway, we're in new ground here. It's going to be interesting to see where people go with this overall. So there are a number of models that they've got here. This is a little bit about the Technology Innovation Institute. If you want to go and look at their website, you can find out a little bit more about them, who they are. They seem to be doing a lot of collaborations, etc. Looks very interesting. And if we come and look on the Hugging Face, on their Hugging Face page, we can see, what they've actually released here. So they've basically released a 40 billion parameter base model, which is the one that we've just looked at the stats for. They've also released a 40 billion instruct model, which I'm going to have a play with in code in a second. And then they've also released a Falcon 7 billion base model and 7 billion instruct model there. So if we come in here and look at the model here, we can basically see that they were going for something that would outperform Llama, Stable, LM, Red Pajama, MPT, and that's why they've submitted to the leaderboards there. This particular version has been fine-tuned on a data set that they're pointing to here. I don't know a lot about this data set. I'm not sure about the licensing, whether it's just a distilled data set or it's something new from scratch here. You could always fine tune this on Open Assistant or something like that as well if you wanted to do that. It is very interesting that they make this comment here that this is an instruct model which may not be ideal for further fine tuning. If you're interested in building your own instruct chat model, we recommend starting from the Falcon 40B. I'm not sure why they're saying that. Could be the way that they've prompted it. It will be interesting to see if people do fine tune this. Will it get better or worse in going for this? So the other one that they've released is the 7 billion one. So this one, they're a little bit vague in saying that it's released on a mixture of chat instruct data sets. So I'm not sure if this is distilled data sets that you perhaps can't use or whether it's things that you actually can use for these. There's more information here about that it's the flash attention, multi-query from Noam Shazir's paper for the decoder there. There are a bunch of interesting things. I think let's jump into the code and see how these perform. Okay, so first off, let's have a look at the Falcon 40 billion model. So just getting this model to run is a feat just by itself. So I've managed to get it running in 8-bit mode. But even getting it to run in 8-bit mode, I'm having to use 4 GPUs in here to get enough GPU RAM here. So it's actually using about 50 gigabytes of GPU RAM for getting this going. So I'm running this in Colab, but it's a custom Colab. You won't be able to run this on Colab Free or even Colab Pro out of the box. Anyway, we then basically set it up, and then to get it actually going, because they've got a bunch of custom code in there. My guess is for the flash attention and for the decoding, for the inference decoding, basically that doesn't seem to be compatible with the 8-bit stuff. So therefore, to actually get it to work, I'm having to auto-cast everything here. So you'll notice this is what I'm doing. Anyway, once we've got that going, we can actually test it out. And the results are a mix. So I don't know a lot about the data set that this instruct model has actually been fine-tuned on. My guess is that maybe it's not as good a data set as something like the Evolve data set, some of the other Vicuna data sets that people have been using recently. One of the frustrating things is you'll see, even for questions like, can you write me an email? So about Sam Altman giving reasons to open source GPT-4, we get things like, as an AI language model, I cannot provide personal opinions or arguments. So this definitely seems to me like it's probably trained on some distilled data, but it's certainly not one of the filtered data sets that have been done here. So that's a little bit disappointing. That said, once it gets past that, the quality of the output is quite nice for some of these. For simple questions like this, it seems to basically go on. So rather than just tell us London, it will actually give us the capital of city is London. I just haven't cut out the input prompt on this one today. Write a story about a koala playing pool and beating all the camelids. Does it nice, but it's pretty short story here. And it does seem to be rather succinct in most of its outputs for this. Again, when I ask it about The Simpsons, we get the whole, as an AI language model, I do not have personal opinions or emotions, etc. So again, this makes me think more that the base model is actually pretty strong or very strong based on the scores that we saw before. But whatever it's been fine-tuned on here, perhaps is not the best data set for doing the fine-tuning for this. One of the responses that I was very disappointed in was this. So this is basically one of the FLAN reasoning questions. And I expect the big models that are sort of 33 billion and up to be able to get this right. Certainly some of the fine-tuned Llama 33 billion ones can get this right. Here, this is not getting it right, where we ask it, the answer should be 9 apples. So it's 23 minus 20 plus 6, and it's saying 11. This is not a good example of this. When we ask it even just benign questions about like, can you write a haiku in a single tweet? Again, we get, I'm sorry, as an AI language model, I can not write, but I can provide you with the haiku format. And then it's going into some sort of formatting stuff there. So again, that's pretty disappointing. It does go on to say, therefore, it is possible to write the whole haiku, but as an instruct model, we'd want something probably better than this. The questions about Geoffrey Hinton. Can Geoffrey Hinton have a conversation with George Washington? No, it does seem to understand that, okay, that George Washington was alive a long time ago. I think it gets Geoffrey Hinton's birth date wrong or birth year wrong. When we ask it about, could Geoffrey Hinton have dinner with Harry Potter? Again, this is an interesting sort of thing. And it's basically to say, unlikely that Geoffrey Hinton had dinner with Harry Potter. And it gives us this sort of shows the strength of the model in that it gives us that Harry Potter is a fictional character, a creation of J.K. Rowling, while Geoffrey Hinton is a real person and a researcher in the field of artificial intelligence. So that one is actually a very nice answer that we've got there. And then for the factual things, it does reasonably well on some of the other sort of standard questions that I ask it. The question about Marcus Aurelius' son, it gets that correct straight away about it being Commodus. When we ask it about who was the Emperor Commodus here, it gets the date right on this one. I don't think it gets the date right on the 7 billion one. We'll have a look at that in a second. And then it basically he was depicted in the film Gladiator, which is a good sort of example. So anyway, this is the 40 billion one. Let's have a look at the 7 billion one and see how that one went. Okay, so this is the 7 billion one. I'll share this notebook so people can play with this themselves. You can load this in on a single GPU, no problem. You will find that, you want to play around with these settings that they've put in here. I've taken those, but I've then played around with them a bit to do this. So this one, you don't need to auto cast. You can basically just load it in. And I'm not even using 8-bit on this one. This is just a normal model. And the responses, again, are pretty decent for this. I wouldn't say they're great responses. It's interesting that whereas the 40 billion one refused to write the email to Sam Altman, the 7 billion one seems like it's up for it. And it writes a pretty decent, coherent argument going on there. So this makes me really think that these models have been trained on different data, and perhaps the data set that they chose for that 40 billion one is just not as good as what's going on here. That said, though, when we look, at some of these, it's very short for like writing a story and doing some of, these other tasks. And again, we still have as an AI, I do not have preferences or likes. That's still definitely in there, which makes me think that this is distilled from ChatGPT or some other model in there. I don't think that's going to be in the human ones. Again, the reasoning question about apples, it doesn't do a great response here at all. It's saying that there are 27 apples, right? So this model hasn't done well in that. So overall, just to sum up, I would say that it's interesting that, the base models are getting such high scores on the benchmarks, yet these fine-tuned versions are not doing that great. And this maybe reinforces why they suggest here that this instruct model is probably not the way to go, that maybe training your own one from the Falcon 7B base model is a better way to go. And I think it would be very interesting to see someone take this Falcon 7B and train it up on one of the better data sets for doing the instruct fine tuning, maybe one of the Vicuna, what people have been using for the wizard models, that kind of stuff in this. Anyway, this was Falcon. It's definitely an interesting model. Serving the 40 billion one is definitely going to be challenging. I think, until we can get that in, perhaps 4-bit or something like that, it's probably going to be beyond what most people want for this kind of model. But the 7 billion one, you can certainly have a play around with. And this is getting better stats than some of these other models. So it does lend itself, and it's been trained on 1.5 trillion tokens here. So if that's the case, it does lend itself to a nice fine tuning with one of the filtered data sets that people have been using over the past month or so. Anyway, as always, if you've got questions, please put them in the comments below. If you found this useful, please click like and subscribe. I will talk to you in the next video. Bye for now.